Hello everyone, I am Sanjana and I would like to welcome all of you on my channel Literature Catalog. Today's video is gonna be about the Anglo-Saxon period. So let's get started and get right into the video. We all know the literature is as old as human language and as new as tomorrow's sunrise. And literature is everywhere, not only in books but in videos, televisions, radio, CDs, computers, newspaper, and in all the media of communication where a story is told or an image created. It starts with the words and with speech. The first literature in any culture is oral. The classical Greek epics of Homer and the Asian narrative of Gilgamesh and the Bhagavad Gita. The earliest version of the Bible and the Quran were all communicated orally and passed on from generation to generation with variations, additions, omissions, and until they were set down in written form. In versions which have come down to us in English, the first signs of oral literature tend to have three kinds of subject matter: religion, war, and the trials of daily lives, all of which continues as theme of a great deal of writing. There is a vast expanse of time before the Norman conquest in 1066. From the fragments of literary text remains, although these fragments make quite a sustainable body of work. If we consider that the same span of time has passed between Shakespeare's time and now has passed between the earliest extant text and 1066, we can begin to imagine just how much literary expression there must have been. But these centuries remain largely dark to us, apart from a new illuminating flashes and fragments, since almost all of it was never written down, and since most of what was preserved in writing was destroyed later, particularly during the 1530s. The fragments that remain confirm that the motivations and inspiration for producing literature and for listening to it or later reading it are the same all through the history. Literature can give comfort and consolation, can illuminate and mirror our problems, and can affirm and reinforce social, political, and ideological standpoints. The spread of Anglo-Saxon, then English, as a language was one of the most significant elements our several countries in modeling a national identity out of all the cultural and linguistic influences which the country underwent, and Icelandic and Viking Latin and French, Germanic and Celtic, as well as many local linguistic, cultural, and social forces, all were part of the Anglo-Saxon melting pot, which would eventually become English, the language of England, then of the Britain. So, English literature was actually started with Anglo-Saxon literature, and that they can be called as father of English literature. They are called forefather of English literature, and they were actually a group of Germanic peoples who are from the 5th of the centuries and to the time of the Normans, in 10 somewhere in 10 and 666, inhabited and rural territories that are the today's part of England and Wales. The Anglo-Saxon works include genres such as epic poetry, hagiography, sermons, Bible translations, legal works, chronicles, riddles, and other. In all, there were about 400 surviving manuscripts and significant corpus of both popular and interest and specialist research. Some of the most important works from this period include the poem Beowulf, which has achieved national epic start with the Britain, and the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle is a collection of early English history. The poem Catherine Hymn from the 7th of century is one of the oldest surviving written text in English. The large number of manuscripts remain from the 600 years Anglo-Saxon periods, with most written during the last 300 years in both Latin and the vernacular. Old English literature is among the oldest vernacular languages to be written down. Old English began in written form as a practical necessity in the after death of the Danish. Invasions church officially were concerned that because of the drop in Latin literacy, no one could read their works. Likewise, King Alfred the Great, wanting to restore English culture, lamented to the poor state of Latin education. So, general dictation in England, that there were very few on this side of the Humber who could translate a letter from Latin to English, and I believe there were not many beyond the Humber. King Alfred noted that while a very few could read Latin, many could still read Old English. He thus proposed that students be educated in Old English, and those who excelled would go on to learn Latin. And in this way, many of the texts that have survived are typical teaching and student oriented texts. In total, there were about 400 surviving manuscripts containing Old English text, 189 of them considered measures. These manuscripts have been highly prized by collectors since the 16th century, both of their historic values and for their aesthetics beauty of uniformly spaced letters and decorative elements. Not all of the texts can be fairly called literature, such as list of the names or aborted trials. However, those that can present a sizable body of work listed here in descending order of quantity: sermons and saints' lives, biblical translations, translated Latin works of early church fathers, Anglo-Saxon chronicles and narrative story histories of works like law wills, and other legal works, like practical works on grammar, medicine, geography, lastly but not least important, poetry. Nearly all Anglo-Saxon authors are anonymous with some expectations. English was a common tongue of Angles and Saxons before occupied Britain. Before they occupied Britain, and they lived along coast of Sweden and Denmark, and the occupied and land was called England. The what were two other languages in Anglo-Saxon era as Latin and Greek. Latin was spoken by the church related and Greek by rich and royals. Then Old English began. Let's look some brief history about the Anglo-Saxons. According to Saint Bede, the vulnerable, the Anglo-Saxons were descendants for three different Germanic peoples, like Anglo-Saxons, Saxons and Jutes. By these accounts, those people originally migrated from northern German to the island of Britain in the 5th century at the invitation of what is a ruler of Britons, to help defend his kingdom against the Maritime invasions by the Picts and Scottish, who occupied what is now Scotland. And archaeologically, evidence suggests that the first migrants from the Germanic area of mainland Europe included settlers from Frisia, and attended the Roman withdrawal from the Britain about 410 century, and their subsequent settlement in what is now England laid the foundation for the later kingdoms of Essex, Sussex, and Wessex, the East Anglia, Middle Anglia, and Marica, and Angles, and the Kents. The Anglo-Saxons actually represented the a mixture of Germanic people with Britain Catholic influences of the Vikings and the Danish invaders. These tribes were fearless, adventurous, and brave, and they sang at their feast about battles, gods, and their ancestral heroes, and some of their chief were bards. Their songs were about religions, war, agriculture, and English poetry began from these songs. The people of each of the various Anglo-Saxon kingdoms spoke distinct dialects, which evolved over time and together become known as Old English. And five principles of Anglo-Saxons are responsiveness to nature, love to personal freedom, love for religion, love for womanhood, and the struggle for glory. And the famous works of this period, this era, is the Beowulf. The most famous work of the Anglo-Saxon era is Beowulf, whose writer is still not known, but it is actually as an epic and has national epic status in England. Other major poetics like extra books, Guinness manuscript, Worsley books, and this kind of text. We have many famous writers of that era, like Sedumans and all, and these first two are the most famous. Then after Betty, Alfred the Great, Alfred. So these were the famous writers of that time. And mm, now uh, I would like to finish with the concluding lines about these topics, that is the with the history of end of Anglo-Saxon era. It would be called the Battle of Hastings. The Anglo-Saxon rule came to an India to an in sorry in 30 in 1066, soon after the death of Edward Confessor, who had no heir. He had supposedly willed the kingdom to William Normandy, but also seemed to the favor Harold Godwin of his successor. And Harold was crowned king immediately after the Edward died, but he failed to his attempt to defend his crown. When William and invading army crossed the channel from the France to claim it for himself, Harold was defeated by the Normans at the Battle of Hastings in October 1066, and thus a new era was unrest in. The Anglo-Saxon kingdoms from the 650 to 800 is Kent, who settled by the Jutes, Mercia, who best known ruler of and Northumbria, where the monk based East Anglia, made up of Angles, Essex, East Saxons, Sussex. The South Saxons settled here. Wessex, means West Saxons, later the kingdom of King Alfred. And the concluding lines would be the Anglo-Saxon period stretched over the 600 years from the 4110 to 1066. Firstly, there were the Germanic people, and then invaded by the Normans in the Battle of Hastings. And then this era, English keeps on growing day by day in religious and other formats. Then Anglo-Normans era started. With these concluding lines, I am finally I am going to finish up today's discussion with this useful steps. Thank you so much for showing your interest and attention on my videos. If anyone has any question, I would be happy to open with the discussion. So I would be interested to hear from you with your thoughts and or questions. So feel free to ask and keep watching Literature Catalog. Thank you so much.